My name is Helen Avery, and I am 71 years old. On the morning the federal agents came, I was standing at my kitchen sink in the little white house on Maple Street in Columbus, Ohio, washing the same blue ceramic mug I had used every single day since my husband died. The mug had a small chip on the rim. I never fixed it. Some things you simply learn to drink around. The water ran warm over my hands. Outside, the early spring light was thin and gray. Inside, the house still smelled faintly of the pancakes I had made for the girls an hour earlier. They rang the doorbell at 9:14 a.m. Two men in dark suits. The older one had gray at the temples and the quiet voice of someone who had delivered bad news for a living. He showed me a badge and said my full name the way people do when they already know the ending of your story. I let them in because that is what polite Midwestern widows do. I offered coffee. They declined, but they sat at my kitchen table anyway, the same oak table where I had written the check that ruined everything. The older agent opened a folder. "Mrs. Avery," he said, "do you understand why we're here?" I looked at the chip on my mug and told him the truth. Yes, I wrote the check. $114,000. Every last dollar that remained after the funeral costs, the final taxes, and the small pension that arrived each month like a polite apology from the universe. I had made the check out to Avery Coastal Holdings, my son's company, my daughter-in-law's dream, 14% returns, secured. Family only, Lauren had sat in the exact chair the agent was using now. She had held my hand across this table and said, "Mom, this is the last time you will ever have to worry about money." She always called me Mom. I still remember the cool pressure of her perfect French-tip nails against my skin. I need you to understand who I was before that check, because the woman who signed it is not the same woman speaking to you now. I married Thomas Avery in June of 1976. We were both 21. He was a high school history teacher with a soft laugh and a dangerous habit of bringing home stray dogs. I was a bank teller with neat handwriting and a belief that if you balanced the numbers carefully enough, life would stay balanced too. We bought the house on Maple Street in 1979 with a 30-year mortgage and a lot of hope. Michael was born 2 years later. I stayed home until he started kindergarten, then went back to the bank because the benefits were good and Tom's teacher salary never quite stretched far enough. We paid the house off in 2003. Tom cried the afternoon we burned the mortgage papers in a metal trash can in the backyard. He said no bank, no stranger, no stroke of bad luck could ever take this place from us. I believed him. For a long time, the world let me keep believing. Tom died on a Tuesday in March, 3 years before the check. Heart attack while shoveling the last wet snow of the season. The neighbor found him. I was at the grocery store buying the exact brand of coffee he liked. When I came home, the porch light was still on. I left it burning for 7 nights. On the 8th night, I turned it off, and the quiet that followed was louder than any sound I had ever heard. Michael and Lauren flew in from Charleston for the funeral. Lauren was already the kind of woman who made every room look curated. She wore black that somehow still looked expensive. She hugged me longer than anyone else and whispered into my hair, "We're going to take care of you now." Makes you stupid in very specific ways. You start hearing safety in every sentence that begins with the word we. They stayed a full week. Lauren cooked elaborate meals and posted nothing about them. Michael handled the paperwork with the same careful attention he once gave to his science fair projects. On the final night, after the girls, then only 4 and 2, were asleep upstairs, Lauren sat at this kitchen table and told me about the business, coastal vacation properties, friends and family investment rates. A private fund already returning double digits. She spread glossy folders across the table like a dealer laying out winning cards. Pictures of docks at sunset, infinity pools, white sand, happy couples who looked nothing like anyone I had ever known. Michael sat quietly, nodding the way he used to when he was 12 and wanted approval. "Mom, I've looked at the numbers," he said. "This is solid." I asked about audited financial statements. Lauren laughed the soft, charming laugh she used whenever someone asked an inconvenient question. We're not some cold Wall Street operation, Mom. This is family. We have skin in the game. Real skin. I wrote the first check that same week. $40,000. Just to get your feet wet, Lauren said. You'll see the returns in 6 months and then you can decide about the rest. 6 months later, the statements looked beautiful. 14%. Lauren sent screenshots with little digital confetti falling across the screen. Michael called and said they were already looking at a second property in the Outer Banks. I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight since Tom died. Maybe I had done something right. Maybe the careful years of balancing ledgers had finally paid off in a different kind of ledger. In September, I wrote the big check, $214,000. Everything that remained of Tom's life insurance and the savings we had kept for just in case. I wrote it at this table on a Sunday afternoon while a football game murmured on the television in the next room. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Lauren was on speakerphone. She cried happy tears and said, "Mom, you just secured all of our futures. Tom would be so proud." I hung up and sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time. The porch light was off. I remember thinking that Tom would have been proud that I was being smart with the money instead of letting it sit in a low-interest account. I was wrong about almost everything. The girls arrived on a cold Thursday morning in January. I had not seen them in person since the Christmas before Tom died. Ava was 6. Sophie was 4. Lauren's social media had always shown perfect images, matching coats, beach sunsets, captions about intentional living and protecting our peace. In those photos, the children looked like beautiful accessories. That morning, Lauren's white SUV pulled into my driveway at 7:40 a.m. She did not turn off the engine. She walked the girls to the porch, set down 2 small suitcases and a pink backpack with a unicorn patch, and handed me a folded piece of paper. Her sunglasses stayed on even though the sky was the color of wet concrete. "Just until things settle," she said. Her voice was bright and thin. "Michael's dealing with some temporary cash flow issues with the fund. A few weeks at most. You'll barely notice them." She kissed the tops of their heads, told them to be good for Nana. Got back into the warm car and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. Sophie was crying without making any sound. Ava held her little sister's hand and looked up at me with the careful evaluation of a child deciding whether an adult was safe. I read the note later, after I had brought them inside and taken off their coats. "Mom, temporary situation with the fund. Keep them close. Don't call the school yet. We'll sort everything soon. Love you, no phone number. No return date." No explanation that made sense. I stood in my entryway with 2 small children, the smell of Lauren's expensive perfume still hanging in the cold air, and the neighbor across the street watching from behind her curtain. I waved as if everything were normal. Then I closed the door and made pancakes, because that is what you do when the floor tilts, and you need something ordinary to hold on to. Ava ate 3 pancakes with too much syrup. Sophie only picked at the edges and watched me over the top of her fork. That first night, I put them in the guest room that had once been Michael's. I found an old nightlight shaped like a yellow star and plugged it in. Sophie would not sleep unless the bedroom door stayed wide open. Ava packed the pink unicorn backpack every single night before bed, pajamas, the stuffed gray rabbit, a juice box, and set it carefully by the front door with the straps facing up. "We're ready when Mommy comes back," she explained in the calm voice of a child who has decided that preparation is the same thing as control. I did not correct her. Hope is load-bearing at 6 years old. You do not get to take it away just because you know better. The early weeks were a strange mixture of unexpected tenderness and bone-deep exhaustion. I had forgotten how much noise small children make, how much food they can waste, how many questions they ask after the lights are out, how a 4-year-old can sense fear in an adult the way dogs sense storms. Ava talked constantly, a bright, nervous stream of observations about the neighbor's cat, the crack in the sidewalk, the way my coffee smelled different from her mother. Sophie barely spoke at all. She communicated mostly by pointing or by climbing into my lap without invitation and staying there until whatever was frightening her had passed. I enrolled them in the neighborhood elementary school using a temporary guardianship form I printed from the internet and a carefully vague story about Lauren being overseas for work. The principal, a woman about my age with kind eyes and no patience for nonsense, looked at me for a long time over the top of her glasses. Then she signed the papers. She had seen quieter versions of this story before. At night, after the girls finally slept, I sat at the kitchen table and tried to reach Michael. His phone went straight to voicemail. Lauren's number rang once and then disconnected. The monthly statements from Avery Coastal Holdings stopped arriving. The investor portal login stopped working. The cheerful confetti animations were gone. In February, the first official letter came from the bank, intent to accelerate. The house on Maple Street, the house Tom and I had paid off with 24 years of careful payments, was listed as collateral on a home equity loan I had never signed, never seen, and never agreed to. The loan had been taken out in my name 18 months earlier. Electronic signatures, my social security number, my mother's maiden name used as the security question. Lauren had always known the answers to those questions. She had made a point of knowing. I sat on the cold kitchen floor with the letter in my lap and cried for the first time since the week after Tom's funeral. Not the loud kind. The quiet, leaking kind that comes when you finally understand that the ground you trusted has been hollow for a long time. The girls found me there. Ava brought a paper towel from the counter without being asked. Sophie climbed into my lap, put her small head against my chest, and stayed perfectly still, as if she were listening for a heartbeat that might stop. That was the night I started the notebook. I am a woman who spent 32 years balancing other people's ledgers at the bank. Charting is how I pray. Every receipt, every unanswered phone call, every date one of the girls asked for their mother, every time the pink backpack moved 2 inches closer to the door 2 inches farther away, every pediatric appointment. Every night Sophie woke up crying for a woman who was not coming. I did not know yet that I was building evidence. I only knew that someone in this family had to keep an honest record. The federal agents returned in late March with more questions and a thicker folder. By then the news had begun to surface in careful, legal language. Avery Coastal Holdings was a classic pyramid structure. New investor money paid the early, impressive returns. Most of the coastal properties in the glossy brochures did not exist. The money had bought a boat, a second home with an infinity pool, first-class flights, and a lifestyle that photographed like a dream. Michael and Lauren had lived inside that dream while the foundation collapsed under the people who trusted them. The agents were polite in the way people are polite when they already know the answers. They already knew about my check. They already knew about the forged loan documents on my house. They asked whether I had ever seen audited financial statements. I told them the truth. Lauren had laughed when I asked. They asked, gently, whether I wanted to press charges against my own son. I looked at the pink backpack still standing by the front door and said, I want the truth written down somewhere permanent, whatever that costs. They left me with a business card and a quiet warning that the civil lawsuits would come next, creditors, class actions, other older people who had lost more than I had and had fewer years left to recover. That afternoon, I took the girls to the park and watched them play on the swings as if nothing in their world had tilted. Ava pushed Sophie and counted out loud in the clear voice of a child who still believed counting could keep bad things away. I sat on the wooden bench and felt the full weight of every year I had left in my body. 71 does not feel old until the ground shifts. Then it feels very, very old. Spring moved into summer with the slow stubbornness of the Midwest. The girls gradually stopped asking every morning when Mommy was coming home. Ava still packed the unicorn backpack every Sunday night, but she did it with less ceremony, almost like a habit she was not ready to break. Sophie began speaking in full sentences. She told me about the boy in her class who shared his crackers even though he didn't have to. She told me she liked the way my house smelled like clean laundry and coffee instead of perfume. I learned the new, smaller mathematics of my life. Social Security, the modest teacher's pension. The part-time job I took at the public library 3 mornings a week because the mortgage I had never agreed to still needed to be paid while the lawyers fought over the wreckage. Dana, the children's librarian, became the closest thing I had to a real friend in that season. She was 58, divorced, sharp-eyed, and allergic to empty sympathy. She started bringing extra snacks for the girls without being asked. She never once said, "Everything happens for a reason." One rainy afternoon, she found me staring at an old acceptance letter for a senior travel program to Ireland that I would never take. "You're allowed to be furious," she said. "I don't have the luxury," I answered. She looked at the 2 girls coloring quietly at the low table in the children's section and said, "Then be quiet and steady. That's harder work anyway." I wrote those words in the notebook that night. In late August, the letter arrived from Lauren's new attorney, heavy, expensive paper. Confident Navy letterhead from a firm in Charleston. The letter formally objected to any extension of guardianship beyond temporary status. It described the January morning on my porch as an informal family childcare arrangement between consenting adults. It requested that the court preserve the parents' full custodial rights pending their return and the resolution of temporary financial difficulties. I read the phrase 3 times while the girls watched cartoons in the living room. An informal family childcare arrangement, the same clinical language people use when they leave children the way other people leave luggage at a curb. My lawyer was a woman named Ruth Calder. She was 64, carried herself like someone who had already survived the worst day of several other people's lives, and did not waste a single word. She read the letter, set it down, and looked at me over her reading glasses. "She's not coming back for them," Ruth said. "She's keeping the legal door propped open so that no one else can close it. Right now those girls are the last asset she has that a judge might still weigh in her favor. Leverage, a story, proof that she is still a mother." I asked what the long road looked like if I refused to play along. Ruth did not soften it. Contested guardianship review. Possible petition to terminate parental rights if the criminal case broke the right way, abandonment, unfitness, failure to support. A year at minimum. Longer if Lauren fought from a distance, and Lauren had never in her life refused an audience. "And if she offers you a deal?" Ruth asked. At the time, I did not fully understand the question. I would understand it soon enough. The deal arrived on a still Sunday afternoon in September. Lauren came to the house unannounced at 4 o'clock. The girls were at a birthday party 3 blocks away. I opened the front door and there she stood, thinner than I remembered, still striking, the camel-colored coat immaculate, the hair perfectly obedient. 8 months of whatever she had lived through had not touched the surface she showed the world. She stepped into my kitchen as if she had designed it herself. Her eyes made one slow circuit of the room. The children's drawings on the refrigerator, the chipped blue mug, the open notebook on the counter, cataloging, pricing, dismissing. Then she sat at the table, folded her hands, and pitched me with the same calm confidence she had once used to sell imaginary oceanfront lots. "Mom, I'm going to make this very simple because we're family and I still love you," she began. "I will sign full, irrevocable consent for you to adopt Ava and Sophie. Clean, permanent, no contested hearings, no years of lawyers draining whatever you have left. The girls stay in this quiet little life you've built for them." She let the silence settle the way a good salesperson lets the customer feel the weight of the offer. Exchange, only 2 small things. First, you tell the federal prosecutor that the investment was a misunderstanding between family members, an informal arrangement that got tangled up in paperwork. Second, the girls spend a few afternoons with me before my sentencing. Lunch, the aquarium, a few photographs, nothing frightening. My attorney says the judge needs to see that I am still their mother. From her structured handbag, she drew a document already prepared, tabbed in bright colors where signatures would go, and slid it across the table until it rested in front of me beside the fruit bowl. Consent to adoption. My name typed neatly on the petitioner line. Everything I had prayed for in the dark months sat on that table, one signature away, permanence for the girls, no more court dates. No risk, however statistically small, that some future hearing could send them back into the orbit of a woman who treated love like content to be curated. All it would cost was one soft sentence to a prosecutor. The kind of gentle lie families tell every day to protect their own. I looked at the signature tabs for a long time. I thought about the pink unicorn backpack still standing by the front door. I thought about Sophie's careful new sentences. I thought about Ava's Sunday night ritual. I thought about the notebook filled with ordinary, dated Tuesdays, school forms, therapy appointments, dinners eaten together, nightmares soothed, small victories recorded in my steady bank teller handwriting. I thought about Tom and the afternoon we burned the mortgage papers. He had believed the house was finally safe. I had believed the check was an act of love. The truth was the only clean thing left in this family that Lauren had never managed to package, sell, or stage for an audience. If I rented it to her now, even once, even softly, then every dinner I put on this table for the next 20 years would become furniture in one of her productions. The girls would grow up inside the lesson without ever being taught it out loud. That the truth is negotiable, that love photographs best from the right angle, that everything, even children, can be leveraged when the bill comes due. They had already been left on a porch by that lesson. I would not enroll them in it a second time. I slid the document back across the table, past the fruit bowl, undated and unsigned. I said. The word came out quiet and level, the same voice I had used for 30 years at the bank when someone's account simply did not add up. I will not lie to a prosecutor for you, and I will not rent these girls to your camera. Lauren's face did something I had never witnessed in all the years I had known her. The performance stuttered. For one unscripted second, she looked like a woman who had run out of better lines. "Do you have any idea what they will do to me?" she whispered. Her perfect nail began tapping the table, tap, 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 a metronome losing its mind. "I know exactly what you already did," I answered. At that moment, the front door opened. The girls were home early. The birthday party had ended with a scraped knee and a sudden request to come back to Nana's house. Ava and Sophie stopped in the entryway. Lauren stood up from the table, arms already opening for the reunion scene she had clearly rehearsed. Neither child moved toward her. Ava stepped sideways until her shoulder pressed against my hip. Her small hand found mine and held on. She looked up at me, not at her mother, and asked in the practical voice of a child addressing management, "Is she staying for dinner?" "Not Mommy's here." A running hug, a scheduling question. Then Sophie, my quiet Sophie who had once gone weeks without a full sentence, looked directly at the woman in the camel coat and gave her one complete, polite, and final statement. "This is Nana's house." I watched the words land. I watched Lauren's eyes travel from the children to the refrigerator, to the slightly crooked school photograph held up by a lighthouse magnet, and then past it, down the short hallway to the front door where the pink unicorn backpack still stood zipped and ready, straps up, exactly as it had stood for 8 months and 11 days. She knew that backpack. She had bought it. She had photographed it on the first day of preschool with a caption about little wings learning to fly. I watched my daughter-in-law understand, in one long and completely unphotographable second, what the backpack was still doing by my door. That a 6-year-old had kept a bag packed for her mother every single Sunday night, juice box rotated when it grew warm, for 240 days. And that the child now holding my hand had finally stopped announcing the reason out loud. Lauren's face went pale in a way that had nothing to do with prison sentences or frozen bank accounts. It was the pale of a woman doing arithmetic that refused to come out even, subtracting an audience that had already left the theater. She picked up her handbag, left the unsigned consent form on my table, and walked out past the backpack without once looking down at it. The door clicked shut. No one followed her. I told the federal prosecutor the clean truth. It took 14 minutes and changed nothing about the weather outside. The older agent shook my hand afterward the way a librarian returns a book that has been overdue for a long time. Michael entered a guilty plea in November. 9 years. A restitution order he will still be paying in whatever afterlife accepts that kind of currency. Lauren accepted a plea in January. 30 months. The ordinary alphabet of consequences after her name, where the carefully curated followers used to be. I was not in the courtroom for either proceeding. I was at a second-grade winter concert, filming 2 slightly off-key recorders with my whole heart. The termination of parental rights hearing took place on a gray morning in March, almost 14 months to the day after the girls had appeared on my porch with their small suitcases. Ruth stacked the documentary record like firewood. The original note, the airport-style abandonment, the packed backpack, the school attendance records, the therapy notes, the pediatrician's letter about attachment, the objection letter from Lauren's own attorney that proved she had known exactly where her children were for months and had chosen not to return for them. Lauren did not contest the petition. Parental rights terminated for both parents. The adoption was finalized on a quiet Thursday morning in a small courtroom with worn carpet and surprisingly good light. Ava was allowed to bang the gavel once. Sophie considered the judge's gentle question about whether she wished to say anything, then answered with the same calm clarity she had used in my kitchen months earlier. We already live there. The judge smiled and called it the finest legal argument she had heard all year. That same night, after the girls had finally fallen asleep, I walked past their bedroom and stopped. The pink unicorn backpack was open on the floor. Ava was kneeling in front of the dresser in her pajamas, carefully placing the folded nightclothes into the drawer, standing the gray rabbit upright on the pillow, and dropping the last juice box into the small recycling bin with a soft plastic sound. She smoothed the empty backpack flat, the way people fold a flag when the ceremony is over, and set it on the high shelf of the closet. Done. Then she came into the kitchen, climbed onto the chair beside me, and asked what we were having for dinner. I told her tacos. That was the entire ceremony. No speeches, no applause, just a child deciding in her own time that she no longer needed an exit strategy. My house is quieter now, but it is not empty. Ava is 8. Sophie is 6. They still argue about who gets the blue plate. They still need the hallway light left on some nights. They still occasionally pack a small bag when the world feels uncertain, but now they pack it for sleepovers and school trips, not for escape. Lauren writes letters from the facility in another state. The letters read like social media captions that have lost their photographs. Journeys. Growth. This difficult chapter. She has never once asked what the girls prefer for breakfast or whether Sophie still has nightmares. I answer with school pictures and brief reports about the weather. The door between them is not mine to lock forever. When the girls are grown, they will decide what relationship, if any, they want with their mother. They will make that decision standing on solid ground. That is the only inheritance I have ever wanted to leave them. I sold the house on Maple Street in the autumn. The slow drip of fraud recovery will return pennies on the dollar for years. Pennies do not pay a mortgage you never signed. I cried the day of the closing, standing on the same porch where Tom used to wave at the neighbors after work. Then I moved into a smaller place 2 miles away with a backyard just large enough for a swing set and a tomato plant. Dana still comes for dinner every Tuesday. She still brings extra snacks. Some habits are worth keeping. On the refrigerator in the new kitchen at child height, there is a recent school photograph. Ava's collar is slightly crooked. Sophie is missing her front tooth. Both of them are caught mid-laugh because the photographer sneezed at the wrong moment. No filter, no careful staging. No one will ever monetize it or use it to sell a lifestyle. By every standard Lauren ever lived by, it is a terrible photograph. It is the favorite thing I own. I spent most of my adult life believing that love was a bill that came due every month, something you paid with quiet competence, balanced checkbooks, and carefully written checks. It took 2 small girls and 1 empty backpack on a closet shelf to teach me the thing that glossy folders and 14% promises never could. The love that actually saves people is never the kind that performs. It is the kind that shows up on an ordinary Tuesday, sets the table, checks the spelling words, leaves the hallway light burning, and stays. That is my story, 1 check written in hope, 2 children left on a porch, and a backpack that finally, quietly came unpacked. If these words reminded you of someone who shows up without an audience, for the children, for the family, for you, send this to them. Tell them you see the weight they carry. And if you have stayed with me all the way to the end, thank you. Some stories do not need millions of listeners. They only need 1 person willing to sit in the quiet and remain until the last word.